Greetings, my fellow freedom-loving sovereign thinkers. Thank you for tuning into the LL3 podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the wild and wonderful Mountain State, and today's date is Thursday, September 17th, 2020. Yeah, I've just been working on the house, taking my time. Things are looking good. Other home, too. We got to take care of some collateral damage, I would say, in good faith, but don't have to get too bonkers. And, neighbors here, every community has its pros and cons. So always got to be vigilant, but use a lot of finesse. You got your shysters, and you got your wonderful people. I have it over here as well. However, I'll be heading down to South Florida, hopefully around Columbus Day weekend, maybe earlier than that. But I'll keep you posted. Still residents down there, and things are, a few obstacles, inconvenience, but things are going as planned. So I'm happy about that. And I was just, of course, you hear about the whole thing about things may happen. True News talked about expect shysters representing Democrats to be shooting Republicans. This whole faction war. Very tyrannical indeed. But people from all walks of life are seeing the bigger picture on what's coming down. However, it doesn't mean we all could jump in and be part of the factioneer bandwagon team. Because it's nothing more than a fashion trend as far as I'm concerned. When it comes to tyranny, I call it all out equally and have no shame. Plus, you always gotta be ready, regardless of where you're at. You can't never, ever take life and things for granted. It's not just the United States. It's worldwide on what's happening, on what's occurring. So I'm going to talk about a couple of articles. Okay, one I'm going to be addressing about Beirut, the bombing explosion. Good article from American Free Press. And this one here is a reference to Australia. And it's interesting here. It says it's from FEE. So, Australia's violent enforcement of lockdown sparks memories of the Eureka rebellion. The historical thing. So you can see what's going on right now. People being arrested for not wearing a mask. And they're getting thrown in jail. There's footage, too, of one pregnant woman got arrested as well. And I don't know why these jabronis from the state governmental delegates are trying to get their rocks off. Because I'll tell you one thing. He's going to blow back in your faces when least expected. I'll ensure that. Doesn't mean I'll do anything. Because you're all stepping on your own bear traps. Well, we're going to talk about this here. And it's from co-author Mark Hornshaw and Zachary Gorman. So fee.org. Yeah, freedom, economic and equality, I guess called. Yeah, FEE. Good. It's a good website. I encourage people to check it out. Very liberty minded. And it says, just as the general public turned against excesses of Australia's police state in 1854, the same is happening today. 2020 is looking eerily similar to 1854 for the people of Victoria, Australia's second most populous state. This footage reveals a little of the current scene when Aussies protesting against draconian lockdowns and police in riot gear arresting them in large numbers. More on this below. There's video footage, so check it out. Eureka then. First, let us wind the clock back 170 years. Australia is not yet an independent nation. Victoria is still a British colony, establishes as penal colonies for convicts under the guard of the British soldiers. The Australian settlements were government projects from the outset. Historian Robert Hughes described the convict experience as producing an attitude to authority, in which private resentment mingled with ostensible resignation. But the gold rush of the mid-1800s brings in a new aspirational class of workers, including Americans, Irish, British Chartists, and people involved in various European revolutions. The Australian diggings were notably more lawful and organized than those in California. People were well behaved and generally unarmed. They just wanted to get on with digging in the hope of striking it rich. It would take an especially egregious assault by those in power to drive these otherwise lawful men into rebellion. Government at this time consists of an appointed governor and legislative council containing some appointees and some elected members, but voting is mostly limited to landowners. So miners are not represented, with urban employers and wealthy landowners worried about a large shortage of an exodus of workers to the diggings. The colonial government comes up with the scheme to coerce the entrepreneur miners back into the structured employment. Their scheme was a license fee similar to a poll tax, initially set 30 shillings a month. Miners were forced to pay it whether or not they found gold. As gold became harder to find, the license fee became increasingly burdensome and resented. Sounds familiar. Government knows best. The police were not neutral law enforcers, but would engage in digger hunts with accusations of extorting money, taking bribes, and imprisoning people without due process. Diggers were often asked for their licenses several times in one day. As testified by Peter Lalor, the diggers were subjected to the most unheard of insults and cruelties in the collection of the tax, being in many instances chained to logs if they could not produce their license. Miners, moreover, had no neutral court of law to appeal to where they were unjustly treated. Their cases would be heard by the taxation administrators, who were themselves parties to the case. Miners tried sending delegations to appeal to Lieutenant Governor Charles La Trobe regarding the fees, but to no avail. On October 17, 1854, some 5,000 miners gathered over what they felt was an injustice, as a hotel owner and friend of the local magistrate was said to have bribed his way out of a murder charge in an unfortunate spillover of fury. The Eureka Hotel was burnt down. This was the catalyst for what was to become a more organized resistance movement. On November 11th, the Ballarat Reform League was formed under the direction of Chartist John Basson Hoffray. Their demands were the release of 3 miners charged with the Eureka Hotel fire and a Chartist-inspired program of no taxation without representation. Sounds like common law here, right? But when delegates tried to negotiate with the Victorian government, Governor Charles Hotham felt affronted by the fact that they made demands rather than the traditional petition. As a rebuff to their apparent insolence, he instead sent 550 soldiers to Ballarat to bolster the police presence. Then, as now, the situation was moving from petty despotism to organized tyranny. Authorities threatened to use the Riot Act to essentially ban gatherings of 12 people or more. On November 29th, as the miners near Hotham's response, they collectively decide to burn their licenses in outright defiance. The police respond with even more aggressive digger hunt the next morning. From this point, to use an Australian expression, it was on. The land we know as Australia had previously seen a coup d'etat by the military and scattered uprisings by Aborigines, convicts, and outlaws, which all had been swiftly quelled by those in power. There had never been a George Washington type character or a popular uprising, but on November 30th that year, the miners at Ballarat came the closest. Led by Irish immigrant Peter Lalor, the miners hoisted their own Southern Cross flag and made a pledge: "We swear by the Southern Cross to stand truly by each other and fight to defend our rights and liberties." With Lalor elected as a pursuit of military leader, the miners built a stockade, a crude fort, and started engaging in military drills, but not for long. Almost immediately on Sunday, December 3rd, when the predominantly Irish Catholic would be at Mass, government troops attacked and quickly obliterated their makeshift fort, killing 22 diggers and 5 soldiers. The police arrested and detained 113 of the miners, while many others went into hiding. Eventually, 13 were taken to Melbourne to stand trial for high treason, including John Joseph, an African-American man from Baltimore. The trials were held in the capital rather than the Beirut to avoid any local attachments. Interesting there, right? The rebels win public sympathy. The miners must have known that they never stood a chance militarily, but the real battleground both then and now lay with public opinion. People in the capital were initially fearful for a full-blown rebellion, but news of the government's heavy hardness and of miners' courageous stand against such brutal treatment gradually started to win the sympathy of the general public. Large crowds would gather outside courtrooms, with juries frequently taking less than an hour to throw out the case. Given that the accused probably were guilty of what they were charged with, it was a form of jury nullification of unjust laws. Interesting there. So common law does exist in Australia. Remember that to the Aussies down under. All right, and anybody interested from a legal point of view, you can read about the trials here, so you can look it up yourselves, folks. In the end, the accused were released, and a general amnesty declared for those still in hiding, including Lawler. Their license fee was removed, replaced by an export duty and a nominal £1 per year miners' rights. Half of the police on the goldfields were sacked, and one warden replaced the multitude of gold commissioners. The Victorian Legislative Council was expanded to include 8 members elected by diggers who held miners' rights. One of those elected members was Peter Lalaurie, who had survived the stockade and as an amputee after being shot in the shoulder. Former Justice High Court Michael Kirby states, Eureka stands as a warning to indifferent politicians, judges, and other officials. In the ultimate, the law is not obeyed because it is made in this or that way, or even because it is declared in courts of the highest authority. In the end, it depends upon the community's acceptance of it. There you go. So people have that power. If I'm correct, even the Australian Constitution's emblems on it as well. So, in a different way. Eureka now. This brings us to present day. At time of writing, the state of Victoria is facing perhaps the developed world's most oppressive and mean-spirited overreaction from the government in response to the COVID virus. Police in riot gear are forcefully clearing out farmers' markets, harassing elderly women for sitting on a park bench, snatching infants and strollers from fathers, and firing people for catching a bus without a work permit. In the modern town of Ballarat, a pregnant woman in her pajamas is handcuffed and arrested in her own home over a Facebook posting promoted a peaceful protest. In the town, not even under the severest level of lockdown, she was charged with incitement similar to a terrorism charge and could face 15 years in jail. People are being threatened with fines for merely liking a post. Ooh. It shows you fear is a great foundation for government. Government foundation. John Adams made that quote. Always remember these things, folks. Meanwhile, Parliament has voted to suspend itself, giving dictatorial powers to their primer under a so-called state of emergency. What a bunch of cowards, right? The people are under a 9 p.m. curfew and are not allowed out of their homes to exercise for 2 hours a day, and their local neighborhood comparison to Despotian novels can sound trite, but are fitting in this case. 1984, Fahrenheit 451. Yeah, we could We can go on here. Readers might think that the virus must be pretty bad in Victoria to elicit such an authoritarian response. Guess again. At time of writing, there are 12 people in the ICU in the entire state. 12 people. Not 120, not 1,200, not 1,200, not 12,000, not 120,000, etc. Okay? 12 people. Check the latest figures here if you like. You can check it out yourselves, folks. What makes Victoria different is the impossible threshold set by the premier, as though the virus can be made to obey human laws. The premier, has iterated that the lockdowns will remain in place until there are no cases for 14 consecutive days. The number of new COVID cases is reported every day almost like a taunt to the public, while every other statistic like suicides, business closures, bankruptcies, canceled weddings, undiagnosed cancers, lonely deaths from other causes, etc., is ignored. It is zero tolerance for a virus, or innocent people will be punished in the countless other ways in perpetuity. The excessive level of restriction goes against the advice of doctors, epidemiologists, lawyers, legal experts, the World Health Organization, we want to support the globalists, right? Federal government medical officers. The modeling that provoked has been shown to be wrong. Public policy experts have made the seemingly obvious point that a pandemic requires different responses from different sections of the public using dispersed knowledge as any one rule for all response is doomed to fail. And since any reported case means prolonged lockdowns and suffering for everybody, people are increasingly reluctant to report infections or admit to having left their homes. As a result, contact tracing is failing in Victoria while working well in other states. Okay, hopefully the people in Broward County, Florida are listening to this. Hello, bureaucratic Bertha Henry. Of course, the Premier has paid staff of experts who naturally say that the Emperor has closed on this. But even his own chief medical officer backed away from the Premier's most excessive dictates, leaving him grasping for scapegoats. Apparently, people will only sell so much of their soul. C.S. Lewis famously wrote of all tyrannies, and tyranny sincerely exiles the good of its victims, may be the most oppressive. Those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. Remember, government in Latin means control of the mind. Perhaps the Premier really believes he is doing good by doing evil, or perhaps he is just doubling down on mass mistakes to save face. But with so little intellectual support, it's hard to see this is anything other than a ruthless social experiment to see how compliant Australian people can be. So, Pavlov's dog training. Pavlov's dog theory 101, right? So where does the public stand? Politics always divide, and this present case is no exception. Those with the Premier are generally with those more comfortable work-from-home existence. The pajama class panickers, as they are sometimes called, just want a strong leader to do something that seems like it might work, even if it doesn't, having no concept of the cost, since the cost of the perceived protection generally falls onto others. Worse, there are some who, Gillette adds, notwithstanding, seem to think that violence against women is totally fine when it's carried out by law enforcement. They cheer and gloat when people are arrested for simply living their life because it apparently serves them right. Some elements of the media are quick to smear any protesters as crazy conspiracy theorists, while the brother of the pregnant Facebooker mentioned above had reportedly received death threats for trying to raise funds for her legal defense. Yeah,
I'm so tough, I'm going to make death threats to people behind my computer. It makes me so adult-like and so courageous.
But on the brighter side, just as the general public turned against excesses of the police state in 1854, the same is happening today. When the government, in the name of saving lives, criminalizes actually living your life, people start realize what libertarians have been saying for a long time. The state is them, not us. The state is not on the side of the peaceful individuals that make up a society. And there is no aspect of your life that they won't step on to show you who is boss. States can usually rely on corporate CEOs and celebrities to toe the politically correct line, but thankfully not in this case. Business leaders are pointing out absurdities, like how municipal workers can work in groups, but private contractors are prohibited from even mowing a lawn by themselves. Liberty for me, but not for thee. The world should revolve around the states. Those with public voice are lambasting the premier, like this football player whose father, also a famous footballer, died alone, saying, I lost my 78-year-old father, premier. He wasn't dying from this, he was dying from isolation and the loneliness. The general public is realizing it has a voice that the medical experts, besides courtiers on the premier's payroll, are on our side, and the tyrants in charge are increasingly fumbling for excuses. What can be done? It would be nice if people could have some backbone at this time, say to their bosses, we are not doing this anymore. We refuse to be degraded in this way, being sent to war against the people we are supposed to protect, but that is unlikely. But more realistically, in the Australian political system, state premiers can be ousted within days without Parliament even sitting. If their own party room turns against them and calls a spill, a deputy leader or cabinet minister who was fully on board with the agenda 5 minutes ago can suddenly come out as being diametrically opposed to it and take the top job. This is the most plausible way out of this nightmare for the people of Victoria. Viruses are not going away, but premiers can be sent packing pretty easily. The backbenchers of the ruling Labour Party need to fear their own re-election more than they crave the favor of their failed leader. All this is required is enough of a groundwell of support for peaceful coexistence with sensible, contextually appropriate safeguards and the removal of support of bullies and thugs. Resolute Victorians stood up to the tyranny at least once before and will stand up once again. Very solid point. Remember this, folks. There are more of us than them. They are nothing without the people. They get the CEOs. All the money in the world don't mean diddly squat. But they believe you're the peasants. You're the yes folks. The Uncle Toms and Angel Mamas. I say that ethically speaking. But I know this for sure. It's going to be blowback in their faces when you least expect it. Like this, my friends are in Australia and around the world. Action conquers fear. Multiple avenues can make waves. So hopefully, folks, you can, do this, and we're behind you, Australia. Stand with Australia worldwide. All right. Well, you know what? I'm gonna be right back. So stay tuned. All right, guys, I really cut this one short, and I apologize for that. So I'll actually put the link on that for the one in Beirut, the explosion. But I'd like to thank everyone for listening. So feel free to download and share us with social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, if you something interesting I want to check out, whatever you do, please send your correspondence with decorum. Furthermore, I'll leave the footnotes of these articles on my Spreaker page. If you want to do a donation, you can hit me at paypal.me/LuckyLuck3. Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that the demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading the love. And may your guardian spirits be with you.